Did anyone get a notification that it started recording?
No.
Okay. There it goes. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It is about 3:34 here on the 22nd of March, 2023. I'm going to call this set force meeting to order at 3:34 p.m. Thank you all for your flexibility with moving this meeting a little bit later. I was unable to do the 9 a.m. I'd like to start off with a roll call and just a precursor. I don't have admin staff with me today. Felicia was not in the office, so I will be taking notes and doing roll at the same time. So it might take me a minute longer to usher us through this process, but we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to call to order at 3:34 p.m. I'm going to start with a roll call, and I'm just going to go down the list that I have here. Lucinda Sidow with Tax and Rev.
Hey, come in. Jackie, hi.
Okay, I think that might just be someone. If you can make sure to, let me do this way.
I'll put it on you.
Okay. I'm going to go absent. I did not hear from Linda. Stephen Moyes. Milo McMinn.
So I'm present for Milo McMinn. I'm Breezy Gutierrez with the New Mexico Public Education Department. Milo does not work with us anymore.
Okay, thank you, Breezy. I will note that here and get that updated. Leo Delgado. Tom Cole. Next, Anna Linden Weller.
Here.
Thank you. Sarita Nair. Steve Barrick.
Here.
Aurora Martinez. And I think Aurora would have been for Indian and Affairs Department. Okay. Patricia Trujillo.
I'm here.
Great, thank you. Stephanie Clark. James Poviwa. Dana Barr.
Present.
Thank you. Shawnee Harvey, that's me. I am here. Charles Woolman. And Miori Harms.
I'm here, thanks.
Thanks, Miori. Okay. I don't exactly want to do the math right now. I don't know that we actually have a quorum, but we can kind of go through this anyway. So can I have a motion to approve the agenda with flexibility for today's meeting?
So moved.
Second by Steve.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none. All in favor, if you'd like to unmute or raise a hand with an aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? All right, seeing none. Steve, your hand is up for the in favor of approving the agenda, right?
Yes, sorry.
No problem. All right, seeing none, we're going to approve the agenda with flexibility. Next item on our agenda is to vote to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. I do not have those those minutes done. I was unable to get those from another staff member. So what we will do is leave that for our next meeting. I don't think that we took any really large formal action at the last meeting. It was really a budget update and some updates around the plan and legislation in session. So I don't, so we should be okay with that. Minutes will be sent out as soon as they become available, and we can get those approved at our next meeting in April. So with that, we will move to our agenda item number 4, which is discussion on a few different items. The first thing is a session update, legislative session update. There was 2 bills that did kind of got tabled in the session. I believe it was HB 12 and an SB 62, looking at an energy transition division that would have made some changes and stood up a new division within EDD addressing specifically economic transition, but it also would have made changes to the original Senate Bill 112, where this group, as well as the advisory council, was established. It would have made some changes. However, I don't think either of those bills made it through, so there is no changes at present. So we won't be trying to pull any more additional members into either of these groups at this time because we are in alignment with the legislation that established these groups. So that's pretty much what we've got for a legislative session update. And the main thing we're going to do today is we are going to have a presentation from Agenda, who is our contractor who was selected through the RFP process to update the Empower and Collaborate strategic plan that specifically addresses the work of New Mexico's economy over the next 20 years, but also specifically notes some engagement and interaction with both the Sustainable Economy Advisory Council and the Sustainable Economy Task Force. It's a central part of some of those updates. So we've got the team from Agenda here today. I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll do a presentation, then we'll open it up to questions. And then we have a couple more items on our agenda just to close out around public comments and voting to adjourn. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tanner and Georges. Did I pronounce that right?
Georges, yes,
Georges.
Georges, thank you.
Yep, from Agenda and the partner agency that's contracting with them to update our state plan. And I will pull your slides right here. And if you all want to introduce yourself while I'm doing that, please feel free to do so.
Sure. I'll go first. My name, excuse me, my name is Georges Scott. I am the Senior VP at Agenda. We're based here in Albuquerque with offices in Washington, D.C. and Brussels. And I know I'm missing out on some other places, but for our purposes, we're here. We're New Mexico based. We were created over 2 decades ago by our founder, Doug Turner. And so I will move forward. Tanner, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself while we're still here?
Yes, hello there. My name is Tanner Osman. I am co-founder of Westward Economics and Planning Associates. We are an economic and policy consulting company.
If we can go to the next slide, Shani. Thank you. So again, a little bit, we're an award-winning international marketing, advertising, strategic communications, public affairs firm, serving public, private, and nonprofit sector clients. As I said earlier, we were established, created over 2 decades ago. We have developed stakeholder engagement, integrated communication programs across New Mexico, the United States, and the world. We represent Navajo Nation, their energy interests, NATO all around the world, and we've done a lot of things here in New Mexico, like the Uranco project for one. What we do is we connect with policymakers, media, and target audiences, and motivating them to action is what we do best. we do, as I said earlier, we're award winning. We have a proven track record of developing campaigns. We call it campaigns, but we've done both politics and non-political campaigns that resonate and that help move the needle in public opinion and perception. Our partner, if you can move to the next slide, please. Our partner on this project is Westward, and we're very happy to be involved with them. They're cutting edge research methods and data analysis techniques have produced reliable and credible economic policy and planning analysis for their clients. They specialize in comprehensive economic development strategies and recovery plans, regional and industry analysis, workforce development, labor market studies, and downtown planning and revitalization strategies. On the next slide, please. Past performances for both Westward and Agenda include Walker River Corridor, CEDS, Northern Nevada Development Authority in 2021 and 2020, Economic Development and Land Use Analysis for the City of Los Angeles, 2021, ARPA Strategy for the County of San Joaquin, California, 2021, also Cluster Competitive Strategy for the City of Industry in California, 2020 to present, New Mexico Department of Finance and Administration, 2017 to 2018, New Mexico counties. We basically rebranded them. And USAID, Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility, 2022 to present. And I will turn it over to Tanner.
Thank you, Georges. I'm not on mute.
Okay. No, you're good.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So one thing that Georges didn't mention is that the two organizations do have a long-standing relationship. So one of the co-founders or another co-founder of Westward actually was an intern at Agenda
Yes.
when he was in high school and college. So although Westward isn't a spin-off from Agenda, we do have a long-standing tie. And in fact, my co-founder is from the Albuquerque region. So Westward itself, although we are based in Southern California, is an organization that does have roots in New Mexico. And the reason why the two companies felt the need to sort of merge together on this project is to really tie together two expertise which sort of each company has, which sort of tied together to make us a better fit for the types of work that is required for this project. So Agenda, with its sort of community and local ties and its long-standing experience with public relations in the community, are a perfect fit for certain aspects of this project, whereas Westward, as Georges had mentioned, we really specialize in sort of regional economic analysis, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of local economies and providing policy and planning recommendation based on both those strengths and potential vulnerabilities which exist within a given regional economy. If we could go to the next slide, please. And this next slide is just a very nice visual of what I'm going to explain in greater detail in the following slide. The three primary areas with which we will be working on this particular project is on data analysis, community outreach, and strategy revision. And like I mentioned, on the next slide, I'll give you a little bit more detail with respect to each of these sort of dimensions of our work. So to provide you with a little bit of context, and this may be information that everybody on the call knows already, but I think it's worth our while just to have a little refresher here. But in 2021, the state of New Mexico completed what is known as a comprehensive economic development strategy. By shorthand, it's known as a SETF. And this is really a requirement from the US Economic Development Administration. Every agency to which it gives funds is required to perform a comprehensive economic development strategy. And typically these will occur once every 5 years. And the purpose of a comprehensive economic development strategy, I'm going to start using the word SEDS now, a little bit easier to say, but the purpose of a SEDS is really to take stock of where an economy stands at the present time, how it has evolved over a 5 or 10 year period, identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, but then to look out over the next decade to see what strategies can be implemented to improve the current economic condition within a given jurisdiction. And that is exactly the process which the state of New Mexico undertook in 2021. Now, at this, I'm sorry, I hadn't quite finished there. And so there are three primary tasks with which Agenda Westward will be undertaking in our current engagement with the New Mexico EDD. And the first is to update the data in the existing report, but also to supplement the data, to look for areas in the report which could be enhanced and sort of improved based on how the economy has changed over the last 2 years. The second major part of our engagement is to look at those strategies that were made in 2021, look at those departments and agencies within the state of New Mexico who were identified as leading certain of the state's strategies, and to essentially speak to these individual departments to understand how the strategy implementation has been proceeding. Have there been any roadblocks? Have there been any challenges with respect to implementing the strategies that were employed in the 2021 SEDS? And then the third part of our engagement is to hear from more voices in the New Mexico community. So part of this undertaking is to identify groups whose voices we feel, and we're working in close collaboration with the EDD in this regard, voices who we don't think were heard in the 2021 SEDS, to try and understand their takes and to sort of garner their input about the state's economic development strategy. Next slide, please. So with respect to the data updates, so there are sort of 2 or 3 main elements to what it is that we will be performing. The first is that the SEDS was written in 2021, and at that time was the immediate aftermath of the pandemic. So a lot of the data points that existed in 2021 have radically transformed since that point in time. Typically, I like to think of the economy as being a somewhat slow-moving beast. From one year to the next, you don't see a lot of major gyrations or a lot of major movements. But during the pandemic, we did see major movements in economic indicators in a very short period of time. And in 2021, New Mexico's economy was still in the early stages of its recovery from the impact of the pandemic. So the first thing that we will be doing as a team is sort of updating how the recovery in the state has proceeded. And if you could just file forward 2 slides, please, Shani. I'm sorry, I think one of the slides is out of place, but if you, yeah, here. So this slide here tracks the job recovery in the state of New Mexico. So what we saw was that when the pandemic hit in 2020, the state's economy shed around about 12% of its jobs. And New Mexico is the blue line in this chart. So in initially, around about 12% of the state's jobs were shed. In 2021, the state had recovered around about half of those jobs. And if we were to fast forward to 2023, the state still has a deficit of around about 2% of the jobs that it had immediately preceding the pandemic. So that is one area where we will be updating the report. If you were to look at the unemployment rate that is listed in the current SEDS, it lists the unemployment rate in New Mexico at 8.3%. Today, New Mexico's unemployment rate is sub 4%. So there are a lot of things that we know now that weren't apparent in 2021 with respect to how the state's economy has recovered and how job growth has recovered across different sectors of the economy. So one big part of our engagement, again, is to sort of update those figures, which are a couple of years out of date, And in the times that we live in, a two-year window is a long period of time. A lot has changed in the New Mexico economy over the last 2 years, and one of the things that we'll be doing is to sort of up those data points again to give a more comprehensive account of how the state's economy has recovered from that deep plunge that we saw at the beginning of the pandemic. If you could go back to the slide before, Shirley. Sorry to do this to you. Okay, another area in which we will be sort of enhancing the data analysis which exists in the current SEDS, the SEDS that was written in 2021, is to really have a deeper focus on the labor force, worker supply in the state of New Mexico. One of the things that has become apparent since the pandemic occurred is that employers across the nation have experienced a worker shortage. Some states have recovered from better than others, but there are sort of long structural issues which have limited the growth of workers in the US. Some of these have to do with fertility. Some of these reasons have to do with immigration policy. But one thing that did happen during the pandemic is that we saw a big exodus from the labor force. And what that has meant is that one of the keys to successful economic development for any state today is being able to have an ample supply of workers for the employers who seek to employ them. And so one of the areas that we've identified in which we can provide some supplemental analysis compared to what was done in 2020 and 2021 is really surrounding this this discussion about worker supply. What is it that states need to do today to ensure that they have the workers which are being sought by employers, and how has the pandemic changed that? So that is a key area where we will be updating data in the existing report. If we could go forward, please, Shani. I think we'll have to go forward 2 slides. Oh, no, here we go. Perfect. Thank you very much. Another area where the 2021 report is currently a little dated is with respect to the demographic analysis which is being done of the state's residents. So in the 2021 report, the most recent data that were available at that time was the 2019 census. Now, a lot changed during the pandemic. We've seen migration between different states as some people have left some states to locate in others. We have seen older members of the labor force leave, more senior workers leave the labor force. We've seen a greater increase in work from home activity. Now, these were things which the 2019 data do not shed any light on because, of course, 2019 was prior to the pandemic. We now have 2021 data available where we can drill in on how the pandemic shaped the sort of the demographic profile of the state. Have we seen an increase in or decrease in more senior members of the labor force? What is the percentage of people who are working from home in the state today? What has been the change in the migration flow in and out of New Mexico? So this will be another area in which we will be providing data updates. Next slide, please. Now, one of the proprietary analysis that we'll be performing in this study is to compare to do a detailed job of comparing New Mexico's economy to other parts of the nation. And in particular, we've developed some proprietary algorithm which enables us to look at very detailed characteristics of the New Mexico labor force and compare those characteristics or identify which other states in the US have a similar worker profile to the state of New Mexico. We can even drill down within individual communities within New Mexico to, for example, understand which cities in the US have a similar profile to Albuquerque. And the reason that we would do this sort of similarity index and identify the natural peers to New Mexico is effectively to try to understand where New Mexico stands with respect to its labor force, with respect to other locations, and to understand the competitive landscape. We were able to look at peer places to New Mexico to understand how their economy is evolving, where the growth industries are, what the policy landscape looks in these places and compare them to what New Mexico is doing to get a better assessment of the extent to which New Mexico current trajectory is one in which we might expect it to outperform or underperform places which we might consider to be its natural peer. So that again is another sort of enhancement, supplement that we'll be adding to the existing report. Next slide, please. I mentioned there were three specific areas of engagement that the Agenda Westward team will be performing. The first is the data analysis, which I just mentioned. The second is with respect to community engagement. And this is an area where Agenda, located in Albuquerque with sort of decades of experience of local community outreach, is really a stellar and phenomenal organization to be undertaking this effort with all of their local ties. As I mentioned before, we will be working with New Mexico EDD to identify sort of stakeholders in the community who may not have been fully included in the SED strategy in 2021, just to make sure that sort of all members of community feel engaged in the strategy process, to see what other voices bring to the table with respect to identifying New Mexico's potential challenges and vulnerabilities. Next slide, please. And actually, I think I covered this in the previous slide. I got a little bit ahead of myself here, but yeah, the third and final part of our engagement is to effectively do an assessment of how the strategies which were identified in 2021 have been proceeding in the state of New Mexico. So if you look at the 2021 economic development strategy, there were numerous different areas which were identified as being able to boost New Mexico's economy over the next decade. And there are specifically 6 specific strategies which are identified. So to give you an example of one strategy that was identified in the 2021 report, it was felt that there was a mismatch between the type of degrees with which students were graduating in New Mexico and the type of skills that local employers were looking for. And so one of the recommendations was that there would be a better connection between universities and local industry to ensure that the university has programs that is providing the local industry with the type of skills that they're looking for. Again, the idea being that this would help sort of fill jobs locally in New Mexico, rather than have local employers having to engage in national recruitment campaigns. And for each of these strategies, which is identified in the SEDS, a different department or agency is identified. So in some instances, the New Mexico EDD is identified as being the lead organization with respect to implementing a given strategy. In other areas, it might be the higher education department. So within that report, there are a variety of different departments and agencies which are identified as leading particular strategies with respect to growing New Mexico's economy. And what we will be doing as part of this engagement is checking in with these departments and agencies to ask them, how their efforts have been proceeding. Has it been, have they found any roadblocks? Can they tell us any successes? Have they started to implement a strategy and realized that perhaps this sort of abstract idea of a strategy is not going to work, when it comes to implementation? So what we want to really do is do an inventory of how things stand with respect to the current strategies, what's working, what's not working, with a view to being able to revise the strategies as they currently exist, but also identify areas where there have, to use the word on the slide here, have been roadblocks with respect to the implementation of a strategy. What has been the problem with implementing a strategy? Is it a lack of funding? Is it a lack of some other resource? And yeah, we will, again, the purpose of this engagement is really to sort of look to what extent those strategies that were created in 2021 still make sense in 2023. Next slide, please. Once we've completed all of these, the three facets that I mentioned, the updating of the data, the community engagement, and then the sort of the assessment of how the strategy implementation is going, we will work all of this new information that we're creating into the report to help update the report, make it more relevant to today's economy, but also to update the strategies as they exist in the current report as well. And there are a series of efforts that will be undertaken to sort of roll out our results, whether that is presentations to places like the SETF, or other agencies and audiences that exist within the state. So based on all the work we're doing, we'll be able to update the report and ensure that the state has a report which again is sort of relevant and timely with respect to the challenges that New Mexico faces today. With respect to the timing, our efforts are already underway. In terms of the end date, we're working to a June deadline, so it won't be too long for you to wait. Over the next sort of 3 months or so, we should have a significant body of results that we're able to share with local stakeholders. And that is that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tanner, and thank you, Georges, for sharing that with us. Just for members of the SET Force, because the work of this group is so intricately tied to the work of the Sustainable Economy Advisory Council, we wanted to make sure that you all were connected with this group who's going to be kind of undertaking the RFP. So as this process continues and as that community engagement is underway with the SEEK, we're really hopeful that the community engagement piece and some further meetings with SEEK will actually position this group to make the recommendations and look at like the future industries, policy recommendations, et cetera, that will actually tie into moving the work of the SET Force and SEEK forward, as well as the state plan. So we just wanted to make sure, I believe that SEEK has their meeting next week. So this same presentation will be given to the advisory council. And the hope is that as that community engagement piece is underway, that come June 30th, when we wrap up the fiscal year, the updates to this plan will be done as well. And we'll have some really good kind of stepping stones and information on how to move this group forward. I know that this group has been meeting for probably over a year at this point. So I'm really hopeful that with Agenda and Westwood's work on updating the state plan, that we'll be able to engage the advisory council a little more in depth and be able to actually draw recommendations and community engagement expectations from that group and actually feed it into what we're doing in our respective state agencies. So thank you both for your time and thank you for taking on this project. Is there any questions from our SET Force members at this time for these folks?
Shannon, this is Steve Verk. I don't know, there's probably a question here as well, but I just want to make a couple of comments if I may, because this is a pretty important embarkation point for us, I guess. In terms of things that we've discussed previously, and just maybe some observations, as they move in the project. And I guess first of all, I want to say too, now, Tanner, I really like the approach you presented. Georges, I've worked with before, and I know Agenda is really extremely credible. So I think I was glad to hear that. This is a challenging task, so glad to hear that they've been selected. Just a couple of things that I wanted to just plant that have come up in our group's discussion. And so one of them is that there are a lot of recommendations, in the 2021 plan. There's a whole lot of recommendations. And so one of the concerns that some of us had, I think Anna Linda shared this one as well at one point, would be there's so much there that it would be really helpful to just maybe have some priorities in terms of what are the most important recommendations, because there are so many things that are there. That was a concern of many of us I know in the group. I would suggest, I think you probably would know this already, Jersey others are familiar with the area, but along with broadening out the engagement to try to get really good depth in terms of this next step of the plan, I think it might be really beneficial, try to engage, some of the trade associations, for instance, renewable energy, the solar groups, they know in depth, particularly as you talk about labor force attributes and what is needed, what's missing. They're going to know that to a pretty high degree. And then I think the other thing is the economic developers, because they do it as a day job, they tend to really know in depth like what competitive advantages, disadvantages are. And so through New Mexico Economic Development Department, New Mexico IDEA is a really good organization. That's the New Mexico Organization of Professional Economic Developers, right? And then on the business side, obviously the chamber as well has done a plan of their own. I suspect it has some stuff to fill in. So just a couple more thoughts. Thanks for your patience here, but this is, really neat to hear you're getting on the blocks right now. Is that so? Really looking at the sustainable aspects of the economy. So much of it is changing, I think, as you know, right now. I mean, not only is it an economy in transition, but particularly the sustainable segments are really changing fast. And so if you're able to identify, okay, given all these changing industry segments, essentially, what opportunities specific and challenges specific for New Mexico does that present, I think would be really helpful for us. And let's see, and the only other thing I was going to add, thanks for your patience, is I really like Tanner's thoughts and your overall approach in terms of workforce and needed skill sets and deficiencies. I think as a former economic developer, I still, part of my responsibilities, I spent probably half those years in New Mexico. It just really seems like that's, as you know, that's a leading factor for most projects. And it's the one that really we lose on as a base, as a result as a state sometimes. So you really get some depth in terms of, okay, what specifically do we need to do to be successful in attracting, expanding, starting up enterprises, in these segments? What skill sets are those? It sounds like you're going to do that. I think would be extremely valuable. So anyway, thanks for listening to my thoughts. I'm glad you're getting started.
Good to hear
Thank
from you,
you.
Steve.
Thank you, Steve. And Anna Linden, I see your hand up.
Thanks, Shani. I wanted to echo what Steve was saying and maybe expand a little bit on how we could you might want to think about the ways in which communication and connectivity between recommendations and implementers, I guess is the word, has sometimes been lacking in previous iterations of these kind of statewide planning processes. Thinking only of my own agency, I work with energy, minerals, and natural resources. We have done our best to stand up a code training process for people in the construction industry to get that kind of new renewables training out there, and we have had real difficulty with uptake. And maybe we're really bad at marketing, and maybe we're going about it the wrong way, or maybe the places where individuals in these industries are seeking information aren't the ones that are hearing from us. So I think that it might be useful as you go through the previous recommendations in the 2021 plan and the recommendations from the Sustainable Economy Advisory Council, which are really very community focused and in a great way, to draw those lines back to where our stakeholders and our New Mexican workers are asking for things, and where the state is trying to give them things, and where those haven't hooked up. Because I think that's a problem that we've had across the board, and we'd like to fix it. So just drawing those connections back into the state agencies.
That's great. Thank you. Sorry, I'm taking notes. No, that's great. Thank you both for offering your insight and perspective. Greatly appreciated. I'm hopeful. I know we've given like this team like a dauntless task and like here you go 6 months and get it get her done and get her updated. But I think it should go well. There's definitely been some discussion around like who to pull in as far as that community engagement piece is, and to not only speak with the SEEK, but to really reach out into the community as well. I'll make sure that both of your comments, Steve and Annalinda, and that I get those over to the Agenda and Westwood team for them to move forward. And does anyone else have any more questions for the group at this time? Or for the team? You know. Okay. Well, I'm very much looking forward to this. Let me see what else. Okay, so we can move to our next item on the agenda, which is just public comment. So if we, yeah, Georges.
Are we dismissed basically, or?
Yes, absolutely. And if anyone, yeah, you all are free to go. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see you. I think we will see you next. I'll email you offline, but
Okay.
hopefully we'll see you next week. Thank you
you.
both.
Thank you.
Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So, just another comment that I wanted to make. I'm really glad that you all got to chat with this group kind of initially, because it's going to be really important when we're talking about how to actually do this work and implement it, that it actually be coming from a place where we as state agencies can actually maybe implement some of these changes, or at least try to work them into, policy, and then just have them kind of front and center as we move forward. So they're supposed to meet with this advisory council next week as well. So the hope is that, my hope is that for our April meeting next month, we will have some feedback both from SEEK and Agenda to kind of move this work forward. And my desire is to potentially have a joint meeting between these two groups to kind of maybe talk about getting back to basics and really just looking at encouraging the advisory council to get us information and recommendations in a way that we will actually be able to take that and push it forward through to our cabinet secretaries and our leadership and up through the administration to start moving this work. So either that will take kind of the form of a combined meeting with both groups, where we'll go into a closed session to kind of talk just amongst the membership as opposed to with public. And if we don't do it that way, we'll just have two independent meetings, and I will likely attempt and schedule a closed session, at least for this meeting, so we can talk a little bit about implementation as far as this work goes. So that's my only public comment. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to add before we entertain a motion to adjourn? Okay, seeing none, may someone please move to adjourn the meeting?
I would move to adjourn. This is Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Do we need a second? This might be one of those things where we don't actually need a second because it's a vote to adjourn. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Breezy, is that just a hand up in favor of adjourning or a question? I'm assuming that it's probably for adjournment. All right, hand went down. So I will adjourn this meeting at 4:18 p.m. on the 23rd of March. Please keep an eye out for our April meeting. And with that, thank you all for your time. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.